Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And we want to say thank you to our first sponsor ever, and it is Integrity First Home Services. We do appreciate it, and hopefully we don't embarrass you too much.
I'm sure we'll be fine.
We'll manage, just barely. Hey, if you ever have a feeling of reaching out, making contact with recommendations, questions, concerns, litigation, you can reach out to us at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Twitter at
ITLBcast.
And the same for the subreddit, I always screw it up.
ITLB.
ITLB subreddit.
Cast.
Yeah. So today we're going to dive off into something that's more of kind of a talking point that you see with brand new people on the organization, but they've been there long enough to be voted on, but not long enough for, frankly, their thought process on it so narrow-sighted that it's just they don't really consider like the implications of what they're saying. And kind of the classic scenario on this is that you base people's value on the organization strictly by call volume. And he who runs the most calls is the most necessary individual. And I personally don't think that. What about you, Jesse?
No, I think that's far from the truth. I think that literally you could be the most valuable player and not make a single call.
Right.
Because I think the value is more in the general sense. Your value anywhere as an employee of anything is based on the problems you solve, right? So
right.
You solve big problems, you have big value. You solve little problems, you have little value. And I look at employees in my business that way. I look at just life in general that way. Like, and especially at the fire service, we're there to solve problems. That's what our job is, right? So if you're there and you're solving problems on scene, that has some value to it. But if you're solving bigger problems, and when I'm saying bigger problems, I mean you're figuring out how things are going to be worked, scheduling, financing, how to get a truck fixed. You're figuring out things that take more time, energy, and effort than the 20 minutes on scene, and figuring out how to get the cat out of the tree. There's some complex problems that we deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Daily, weekly, monthly, yearly,
yeah,
biannually, decades, millenniums.
Yeah.
It's I can truly understand where at face value you say that I run 90% of the calls and potentially feeling underappreciated for that. Well, here's the problem. That's literally what you signed up for.
Yeah, the calls are, that's a given. You're doing that regardless. And
you're not going to get a Golden Woodchuck Junior Achievement Gold Star for showing up to calls. That's your purpose.
And I'll even go a step farther than that. So I have a view of all that that's not necessarily the accepted view. I look at running calls, that's something you're doing for yourself, right?
Right.
That is self-motivated, that's me. Sure, you're helping whoever the person is that's in distress, and sure, you're doing all those things, but that's not why you're doing it. There's very few guys that are that pure of heart that can honestly say that they're there running calls because it's to help their fellow citizens or whatever. That's very rarely the case. Usually it's feeding some kind of ego, adrenaline. It makes them have self-worth. There's a lot of things that go into that. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I'm not saying that you're here because you're an adrenaline junkie is a bad thing. It's just a thing. And there's some extreme cases of that where it's probably a bad thing, but that's where training and better judgment come in, right?
Theoretically.
Right. And the guys that are usually that way are the ones that are going to not necessarily thrive or not move up the ladder really far. Like they might make the first round of lieutenant, but they'll never make it up the ladder much farther than that. The guys that are truly doing things for the department that are beyond the me side of it are the guys that are rebuilding a truck in the bay on the weekend, or putting time and effort into working on the budget, or doing things that are actually those, they're the tasks that there is no glory in, right?
Sure.
So they're doing those things, and those are the guys that truly have the value, and it's because it's selfless. It's not for me, it's for the whole, it's for the department.
Yeah, well, and I think it gets compounded by today's instant gratification society, which is, everyone's got a cell phone in their pocket now, and social media and
Amazon.
instant answers, and next day shipping, and it all compounds into, again, really for the new member, and it is kind of a young man, young woman thing, but it can be new member. You can have a middle-aged guy that joined the department and, be pounding his chest on the, let's say, 45% of the total call volume they caught that year. Okay, that's good for you. Thank you. And,
Yeah.
It's like everyone went to calls. There's the adage where you hear it all the time, 100 people on the organization, 90 people are there, and 10 people do the work.
Right. It's not the calls that's the work.
Yeah, it's not the call volume that we're looking at the work at.
Yeah.
That's expected. And it's not a size of an organization thing. You can have a tiny, itty-bitty, classically slow volunteer fire department and have one person doing it all, and it just crush them to death. And if you're in a department where the chiefs keep rotating in and out, that might be an international sign that maybe not all the work's being done.
Yeah, or it's just being done by that one person. I mean, and it goes far beyond the things I mentioned. It's as simple as cleaning the trucks, cleaning the stations, checking things, checking the med bag, checking the fuel, doing all those little things that get taken for granted because somebody's doing it, right? Well, I don't have to do that. So-and-so takes care of that. Well, so-and-so's also probably taking care of 95 other things and would probably appreciate just a little help.
Right.
It's being there and just being present and running calls. That's awesome. I'm glad you're doing that. Use some of that time for something productive that's not for you, right? Not selfish. Have some selfless giving in that aspect, because truly that's what you're here for. That's where you're going to grow the most. That's what's going to make you a better person. There's so many positives that can come out of that, just for an individual and their life, that there's no reason not to do that.
Right. And here's another side of this, because I see it. We're at the station and someone asked me if anything needs to be done. I cannot express how much thank you for asking about if there's anything else that needs to be done. But don't hold off to do anything until you see me to then ask if anything needs to be done.
Take a look around.
Because our organization's big enough and we have enough equipment and tools and stuff that I assure you there's something that needs to be done. Just do it.
And there's probably not one person that knows everything that needs to be done.
No, yeah,
not
sure as hell's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you really want to be the brown noser, do it and then tell me.
Yeah.
That's how you get ahead in this game, is just do it. Because frankly, I could care less if you did it wrong. Just in the act and doing it consistently, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the random stuff, right? Like, oh, here a month or so ago, we took a night that wasn't a training night. It was just an off night, and several folks decided, hey, we're gonna strip out these compartments, clean them out, put them back together, and just give it a real good, thorough once over. Go through what's in there, see if there's anything that doesn't need to be there, see if there's something else that needs to be there, and just make sure it's kind of clean. And when you take an inch of kitty litter out of the bottom of a compartment, that probably needed to happen.
Right.
And that's something that, you don't have to do the whole truck and devote that kind of time. Do a compartment on a truck. And spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. It just depends on the truck and the compartment. But check that off the list, and then that was done. And then that's one less thing that someone else that's truly worrying about what all's happening and what's being taken care of, they don't have to worry about that. It all falls back to that problem solver mentality, and that deal. You're solving a problem there that's a little more complex than are my shoes on the right feet.
Right.
Yeah,
it is though from I'll say at the top end, looking down or listening down or working down, and people equating value to call volume. To me, I just kind of laugh at it. Because I don't know if there ever is a quote unquote perfect number of what someone should hit from a response point of view. I mean, 100% sounds nice, but hey, they'll never have a family. The family hates them. Their job probably hates them, and on and on. So at that point, they probably need more of a one-way trip to a mental health institution than they do another round in a truck.
Let's just dive down that rabbit hole and say you've got that mythical person that makes 100%. Or let's just say they make 90% of they didn't make them all, but they made 90% of the runs. Agency like ours runs close to 2,000 runs a year.
So that's 1,800.
1,800 calls. Divide that by a year. That's all they did.
Yeah.
That's it. They didn't do anything else because there was no time to do anything else. They probably negated showers to get that done. Like it's not a realistic thing, and you can't. There should be no one person doing that in a volunteer organization. That's the bottom line. You should devote some time to some other things.
The handful of times that I get dragged into this conversation, and usually most of our guys are smart enough to not say something like that to me. I'll hear it in the purview occasionally or roundabout way. But one of the things I like to point out is that you're 19, you still live at home, you don't have kids or a wife or boyfriend, whatever, and you work 20 hours a week. We can't take your availability and compare it to someone else. And I'll just compare to myself, where I work at night and it's a 10 or 12 hour shift. I commute. And when you combine my work schedule with the way that our call volume predominantly hits, which is daytime, it's just not there. Where do I catch my call volume? The calls I make is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those are the calls I go to, and those are the ones I'm committed to.
And those are the ones where a bunch of those young guys, they're nowhere to be found, right? They're off having living their life and chasing girls and doing all the things that they're doing.
Yeah, they're laid up and hung over.
Yeah, and they're nowhere to be found, and there's still a ton of calls that happens in that time. But they'll base that their value on, I made a call at Tuesday at 3. Well, great. I'm happy. Glad you did. It does walk all over me on some of that stuff because it's so stupid. It makes no sense. Like you you're willing to say that you're more valuable and you have more, I don't know what would be the word, but you have more worth in this organization than somebody that spent, I don't know, 40 hours a week working on bookkeeping or budget and ordering
Or well, along your lines, 2 hours a week of bookkeeping versus made 20 calls that week. Kiss my butt. Let me tell you, I've got 60 people that can make the damn calls. That's not where we need help. Yeah. It's literally, where are you also assisting the organization? And we have a lot of areas. Again, our fleet's big. We're multiple stations. We're 3 stations. We're 25 apparatus. We're multiple rescue companies in different facets. Maintenance, testing, inspections, ordering, upkeep, cleaning. There's a lot going on in there.
Oh, just air packs.
Right.
Just take air packs, for example. What do we have? 50?
62.
62 air packs. Just making the rounds to do air pack checks.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. And do the air pack checks need to happen more often? Absolutely. Could you check a truck's worth of air packs while you're there and mark it off? Yeah, anybody could do that. Take them 30 minutes probably. If they do a good, thorough job, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, there's so much more to it than running calls. And for the young men and women out there, do understand that's an easy rabbit hole to fall down, particularly when you're comparing new versus the old guys. Well, let me tell you, they may have run 2/3 less calls than you, but they've got a 45-year jump on you. So if we really want to compare apples to bananas, like in our organization, when you cross 15,000 calls, you get to have an opinion. So I'm impressed that you ran 400 this year. That's cool. Thank you very much. Now do it for the next 40 years straight. And then we'll have something to talk about. Till then, keep trying, keep doing the good work, keep learning, because you got more to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would put my average every year of my whole time in the fire service at about 300 a year. And you extrapolate that, well, let's just call it 20 years. So that's 6,000 calls, right? That's a drop in the bucket. I mean, there's organizations that run that many calls in a year.
Right.
Much less, it doesn't mean anything.
So
and that's literally the first time I've ever thought about how many calls I've probably ran, and I literally the first time the math has occurred to me.
So we have a guy this year on our department who's retired, and he's been in the fire service forever, and his grandson's also active on the department, and he's been eating it up this year, working with his grandson, and he went over 1,000 calls this year.
Yeah.
And his grandson wasn't shaking his stick either. He hit, 600-700, something like that.
Somewhere in there.
And there's another guy that's up there in that 500, 600, 700 range. I think my number's around 350, 400 for the year. It might be 300. I don't know. But where I was going with this is it just, there's so much to do that focusing on the numbers. And this guy I'm talking about that had over 1,000 calls, I guarantee you for every hour that he spent on scene, I bet you he spent 25 hours at the station this year.
doing stuff. Not just,
doing stuff. And not we're not talking about dumping in ice coolers doing stuff.
no, we're talking about fixing trucks, rebuilding
Yeah.
trucks,
Ordering crap.
working on training field, welding, doing stuff, real stuff that takes time, energy, and effort, or figuring out, what we needed to order and where, getting bids and doing all that kind of stuff, working on grants. He does a lot of stuff, and I don't know how to convince the younger generation, and I think a lot of it is those guys grew up in the world of participation trophies and instant gratification, like you said a while ago. And I think the participation trophy part of it is part of the problem that's underlying in that, right? So they're expecting an award for doing something, and there's not.
Well, and I'll throw some shade at it myself and the assistant chief a little bit. The department's young. We're want our young men and women to be at the station as much as possible. So there's probably a little too much, for a lack of better words, cheerleading and championing things, just them being at the station. And what I'm saying is that we're highlighting their presence, not necessarily the work that they could, should, or would have done. And they didn't do. But the praise is being heaped on being available for the calls. So, I mean, that might be a tentative little bit of a shadow that we're casting there. I do know, I can say that particularly from one individual's perspective, I would say that had a impact is that, just thanking them and telling them, being at the station, emphasizing that being at the station's the important part, and not, for lack of better words, not hammering them while they're at the station to go find something to do. Well, we're volunteer. I don't expect anyone to be at the station for 10 hours and do continuous work for 10 hours. That said, it sure hell be nice if you took the trash out at least.
Yeah, 10% of that time, right? It's not that you've got to give 20 hours a week of work, right? If you're there 20 hours a week, 10% of it would be nice. 2 hours, do 2 hours of actual work, wash a truck, clean something, do something.
Spread across a week, and you make a dent. I mean, you do that 20%, 10% participation spread across a week, 30, 40 minutes each day, hour each day. It does. You'd be surprised at the tremendous mountain that you would be able to knock down into a molehill pretty quick by doing that.
Yeah. And we see it in neighboring places and different departments and stuff where we're preaching to the choir for the most part, but you see the departments that don't hold anybody to a standard of doing some work, fixing some things, cleaning something, putting some time, energy, and effort into the department.
Right.
You see those departments and you just cringe almost sometimes when you look at them, and they show up in a $500,000 piece of equipment, but it's got half an inch of dirt on it. Like that's not okay.
Yeah, well, and one thing I will give our guys credit for, and it's one thing that I do harp on, and I think for the most part we're truly very good at this, is always tell our guys, you can judge a department by how the hose is loaded on the truck.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the right mindset that at the end of the fire, we're in the absolute cleanup, putting the truck back in service phase. Bar none, the second hardest job on a fire scene. The first one's whoever's first in the door dragging hose. The second hardest job on any fire scene is cleanup.
Putting it back together.
Everyone's tired. No one cares anymore. I get it. Put the extra 3 minutes of time, energy, and effort into it. Get some more people to help you so you make it easy. and put your crap back on the truck right. Make sure it's clean, organized, neat, so that the next time you use it on scene, it's ready to go. It's not up for debate. The hose deploys. You know it's everything's there, on and on and on. So that same mindset needs to apply literally when you come back to the station. And I realize that at face value, empty trash cans at the station don't have anything to do with deploying hose, but it does tell you everything about the person pulling the hose.
Well, but it does. It's the butterfly that flaps its wings in the middle of the jungle, kind of trickled through the whole organization, right?
And there's nothing wrong with wanting a little bit of a head pat, so, some credit, but I'm telling you now, don't expect it.
Yeah, no, I don't. I can count the attaboys on one hand, right?
Yeah,
And I've been doing this 25 years, and I can count the attaboys on one hand. And the few that I've gotten have been excellent attaboys. Like they're usually followed with a plaque or a trophy or something like that. But
right.
I didn't get any of that stuff because I ran the most calls, and believe me, when I was a young guy, I ran the most calls. But that never got me the award, right? The award I got that because I, wrote a grant and got an engine, or I did something that was truly substantial for the organization that was a benefit to the whole.
Right.
The things that have always produced attaboys for me were the things that I did that were not selfish. They were the selfless acts. You can't teach it. I don't know that you can teach that. It's something that somebody's either got to basically realize on their own, or they were just made that way, right? I don't know that you can teach somebody to be selfless.
No, well, I don't think so. I
truly
mean,
don't.
Maybe a lifeguard.
Beat them till they understand it.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think there's any way to teach it, and I don't think that that's necessarily a generational gap either.
No.
That's a personality trait that's just going to be rare. The other thing is on the flip side of this, and we've talked a lot about this, is, the next generation's the worst.
Right.
And I mean, that argument's only been made for the last 1.5 years. The next generation's the worst. They're the end of us. They're useless. They're stupid. They can't do anything. And I would, in fact, argue that today's generation, our Zoomers, our true babies coming up, day for day, comparative to any other generation, I'd say that they're probably the smartest group, probably the best. I don't want to say prepared for adulthood, but they're at least aware of the fact that there's a lot of things out there in front of them. And they may be, that's a youth thing. You don't know how to tackle it, but they're aware of things versus like when I was a kid or you. And I think what they lack in is literally just simply guidance and leadership. I emphatically mean that. And the problem is that today's Zoomers, Generation Z, they were never taught to be self-motivating. They have all these really self-redeeming qualities, but they were never taught the motivation. And now you're getting them at 18, 20, 22 years old, and they know the word motivation, but there's a cross-generational misunderstanding there, where we were self-motivated, and it was taught and ingrained in us and beat into us as a kid. I couldn't tell you how many times as a kid I tell my parents I was bored, and my dad would literally be like, "I bet there's something outside you can do."
Yeah, or there's some wood, go chop it.
Right. And versus the Zoomers today, where they're handed a TV remote, an iPad, Or Christ, their parents just take them somewhere to go be entertained / whatever. There's no motivation that was taught.
Yeah. I mean, we never spent time indoors as kids. Like, I was outside all the time. Like, I can't think of very many times that playing inside was even an option. Like, we were outside. We were
Well, and
outside
the
all the
other
time,
side
and
of
we were
that is
doing
is
stuff.
is being inside would be boring as hell.
Yes.
That's the difference is now being inside. There's more entertainment being inside
Than there was outside.
than there is outside. Don't get me wrong. There's the occasional weirdo kid that's highly motivated. We've got one of those.
My daughter is one of those. Just has way more motivation than I ever had at her age. I didn't become self motivated until, early 20s, where I realized that, hey, if I'm going to do something, I've got to get out and do it. Like, nobody's going to do this for me. But I think you look at, like, the greatest generation, those guys were motivated, right? They did all kinds of stuff. And then they had the boomers, their kids, and a lot of those were not so, they got screwed up,
Yeah.
right? And so then our generation, which is coming off of those, off the boomers, we only knew the screwed up, or, the high divorce rates and all the things
Yeah,
that went
the
into that.
two parent working families, high divorce rates,
All
the
that.
kids by themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people from our generation fell into that same, that's the way it's supposed to be because that's the way the parents were. And it's just, it's continually getting, I would say, worse, in the fact that, even when I was a kid, I had to go work, like, with my dad. Like, there was stuff that I had to do. Like, if he had a project, or there was a project that was going on in the garage or the shop or whatever outside in the house, and that's what was happening this weekend, I was expected to be out there and helping or doing something or cleaning the shop or putting up tools or handing tools or doing something, right? And that kind of learning to work aspect of it is something that we don't always give. They know how to do schoolwork, right? But they don't know how to actually work or develop that dynamic of working for a common goal or doing any of that. They lose a lot of that because there's frankly too many kids and not enough sports, even though they're in 47 different things.
Right.
But they're all just individuals out there doing it, except for the one team that's actually winning. The rest of the teams are just groups of individuals.
Right.
And I think that's part of it, and that's why we harp on the training as a team building environment and all that stuff. And you'll see some of those folks that are the ones that are not, they're basing their worth on the call volume, and they're not doing the extra stuff, are also the ones that are not participating in the training. They're also not the ones participating in the team building exercises. They're not doing those other things that are the parts of it that create the environment for the success, right?
Right. And the other part of that is they'll interject themselves into we'll call it an impromptu training session. And the term that I've kind of been familiarized with is dropping knowledge.
Yeah.
And, people can see right through that when you're talking out your butt and you're not. One, you're a terrible instructor because you've never done it. Two, the people you're trying to impress already know what you're doing and they've already done it through training, so it doesn't impress them. And then three, it's another one of those attaboys pat you on the head and be like, wow, that's awesome. I now know how to change a smoke detector.
Yeah.
And you've made it the most convoluted disaster on the face of the earth. Thank you.
I was impressed with myself the other night. So I had a guest instructor supposed to come in and do some training, and they didn't make it. So here I am, minutes before this training's supposed to happen that I didn't prepare for because I wasn't doing it. I was going to give my little 5-minute spiel at the beginning and introduce somebody and then go sit down. And here we go. I've got to teach this class, which it's a class I've taught hundreds of times before. It's not like I had to reinvent the wheel, but I literally just sat there and ad-libbed the whole thing without any preparation whatsoever.
Right.
And kept it engaging enough that people didn't get up and walk out. That I was impressed with myself. I did a good job. I pat myself on the back, and then we'll roll on. But other than that, it doesn't matter. That's just that was part of my job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate that, and it's the truth with our organization. I've had so much help from so many people since I've been chief. I can't say thank you enough. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to go around and personally congratulate everyone.
Just pat yourself on the back and go on.
It's the way it is, guys. You join you join the organization. There's a certain amount of, let's just get the work done. Doesn't matter who's getting credit for it. Just do it. And I know that sounds like a really negative way to say that, but I mean, really, we don't need to go around and continually impress upon everyone at how star-spangled awesome we are. It's that gets old too. And it also gets old having to always have someone that you have to, for lack of better words, put them in a papoose and carry them around and, make sure you have a pacifier with you because they need so much extra care and attention. That gets old too.
Yeah. So my training lieutenant coined this phrase the other day, and I love it. It's the can't-do attitude, right?
Right.
And I just was like, that's awesome. I wrote it on the board. Nothing can be done with a can't-do attitude. And, put his name after it, and that's his quote for the millennium. Like he's going to carry that one forever. But that's it. That's the answer. Like you literally, if you've got the can't-do attitude, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm better than having to do that. What is going to come out of that? What good is going to happen from I'm not going to mop the floor, I'm not the janitor?
Right.
Well, guess what? Neither am I, but I'll mop the floor. It doesn't matter. It's a task that everybody should be able to do, and we shouldn't have to have a class on how to mop the floor.
Nope. Guys, we do appreciate your time. If you think we're dead wrong on this, or you have another actual recommendation to possibly come up with a way to cheerlead people through this, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, and until next time.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.